From the Lincoln Journal-Star, this is the Life in the Red podcast with Luke Mullen and Amy Just.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Life in the Red podcast. Luke and Amy back with you as usual, here to break down some Nebraska athletics. Big week to talk about. A lot of talk about the football team. We'll get into the Husker basketball team, but today, big day, the eyeballs of the nation watching one thing only, the Life in the Red podcast. We're back.
Sure. There's many things going on today.
And this is the most important of them all.
Maction Tuesday, CFP.
Champions League soccer, very important.
Yeah, there's a lot of other sports happening today. It's also Election Day.
Oh yeah, that too.
That too. Yep.
That too is going on. But the Life in the Red podcast, we wait for nothing. We're back to talk Huskers with you. And really quick, wanted to touch on big win for Nebraska volleyball. We'll break it down in depth with Brent Wagner here in a week. But they've won 19 in a row. They beat Wisconsin. Not only did they beat them, they swept them.
Yeah, I was wrong. I didn't anticipate that happening. I thought Nebraska had a really good chance of winning, but I did not expect a sweep by any stretch of the imagination. So as I wrote in my column that night, there is nothing standing in their way other than, possibly Penn State. And that one match against Penn State will come at the very end of the regular season.
Yeah, I mean, they had that letdown early in the year, but so steady since. Yeah.
And SMU, as we have learned, pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good. They're top 15 once again. So they have the potential to be pretty dangerous, I think, too, in the ACC race, which is weird saying that SMU's in the ACC, but that's all right.
Yeah, still getting used to some of these new conferences. And certainly that was the case when Nebraska football had its most recent conference game. UCLA, Team Nebraska, played many times before in the 2010s as well, so not that long ago. But first time Big Ten conference game. Let's get into all the action, the unfortunate action for Nebraska perspective. Huskers lost that 27-20. And I think the way that Matt Rhule summed it up afterwards, he called it a missed opportunity, and that seems about right.
He said a tremendous missed opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, it was as big as it gets, especially when you consider just the bowl game discussion, the trajectory of this Nebraska football team. You had those two top 10 tests before that, the lows against Indiana, the highs against Ohio State, and none of that progress was there against UCLA.
No, none. Absolutely none of it, which was surprising and frustrating and kind of mind-boggling. I'm sure fans, as I have seen in my mentions and my emails, are very mad.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk, of course, about the way that this team has maybe not been progressing. They've kind of been regressing if you really look at things. And yeah, obviously some of it is opponent specific, but in this game, looking at the black shirts, because they were so good against Ohio State, like that third quarter that they played, we just talked about it last week. We're like, that was the best football that team has played in so long. UCLA just came out with a great game plan, cut them apart early, converted a ton of third downs very early on, and quarterback Ethan Garbers played pretty well. And again, this Nebraska pass defense, of course, they were missing Malcolm Hartzog. Tommy Hill was out at the start. They rushed him out on the field. They needed him out there, but they were still getting picked apart at times.
Yeah, it looked very disjointed. They just didn't look quite ready for what UCLA was going to throw at them, which is kind of a surprise because UCLA has had issues running the ball all season, so you knew that they were going to throw it. Maybe just they just weren't ready for it.
Yeah, and I mean, even that rushing attack, which again, UCLA, they were the worst in the nation. They were not like prolific against Nebraska. Obviously, Garbers broke off that really long scramble, but they were still running, getting a few 3-4 yard gains. That was something that they struggled to do most of that season. So that was a little bit worrying for Nebraska on the defensive side. And yeah, they did turn around the second half. They played much better in that second half overall, forced a lot of punts, got the ball back in their offense's hands. But this is supposed to be the strength of the Nebraska team, the defense. I mean, they've just not lived up to that standard for much of the season, and especially in those losses.
Yeah, now, granted, they did kind of turn things around a little bit in the second half, but, as my mom said today on the phone, if there was only another quarter, it's like, well, it doesn't work that way. Yeah. You have to play well from the very beginning of the game. You can't just play well in the fourth quarter. You can't just play well in the second half. Like, you have to play well from start to finish. And that is, once again, a big problem for Nebraska.
Yeah, good point. And I think just overall, it was not like, I'm not saying it was a horrible day for the defense. It was just maybe below what they would have expected to bring to the table. And that was very, very hurtful for Nebraska in a game that its offense, struggled early. As you're saying, they got into that big first quarter hole because the defense couldn't get off the field. Offense gets the ball once. They go 3 and out. They give it right back. And I think the big standout thing, we've been talking about it for a couple weeks, but it seems like opposing defensive coordinators, they figured out Rhule to an extent. Just blitz him, doesn't have time to throw, and the whole Nebraska offense is thrown off kilter.
Yeah, he has been rattled pretty quickly the past several weeks, which that comes with the territory, right? Not as experienced, still really talented, but when you feel the heat, you're not seeing things as clearly as you were earlier, and you're making more mistakes, whether they're costly mistakes like that pick six to open the third quarter, or, being off the mark a little bit and, having things result in incompletions, right? So they're going to be looking at all of it this week, and maybe things will change and maybe they won't. But yeah, it's not ideal for that to be happening right now.
Yeah, and I think UCLA in particular, like, they were moving guys around pre-snap. I think probably, some of the pass protection, the communication with the offensive line, that was maybe not there in the way that Nebraska would have wanted it. But certainly this issue against, blitzing defenses, like, there were times where the pocket was maybe fine, like hanging there an extra second, like he was just bailing out of that pocket super quick.
He's felt the pressure.
He's taking the hits too.
And so you wonder, that's in the back of his mind. Obviously, he did end up getting hurt in the UCLA game, though not on a sack, on a run play, get smoked in the back. If Nebraska were to be playing this week, he would be questionable. But the hope is that he'll be good to go for the USC game in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, that is very worrying, to see him go down with that back injury. And, tried to go back out there, fell down. Like, that's obviously a tough scene. You don't want to see that for any players. But as you said, I mean, the good news is that it does not sound like it is that, season ending, type of long-term injury that you'd really fear. But, with that game with Rhule, completing just over 50% of his passes, the rhythm was not really there with the passing game. So it's like, why didn't Nebraska run the ball? And obviously they got down early. Like, I totally get that. You're playing catch up. Running the ball is not the way to do it. But they really started to run it well in the second half. And then, they just start passing it again and it wasn't working. It's like, just stick to what's working.
Yeah, I have no answer there.
Yeah, I mean, that's valid because, Dante Dowdell, he ran pretty well, did some good things. And especially, again, with some of those like outside zone plays, they seem to execute those best of all. And it was Ramir Johnson who got in, had 2 great carries back to back. There early in that second half. I think it was 4 yards, 11 yards, never got another carry. It's like, that's productive. That's good running. Like, what's the plan there at running back? Why are they not running? We don't really know.
Yeah, I just think that there's some panic with it, yeah, I don't know. They've got to reassess that situation, though.
Yeah.
Because it's just mind-numbing going away from something when it's working like that. Now, if it's not working, okay, sure, right? But you can't go away from something when it's working.
Yeah, very difficult.
You play the hot hand.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is part of the issue I think Nebraska fans have as we kind of go big picture on this offense, talk about play calling. It was a big topic with all the screen passes 2 weeks ago. But I think that was more of a sign of like the general, like, where is the offensive identity, which is what we talked about a couple weeks ago with this Nebraska football offense. They just seem to get in their own way a lot of the time. Like, as you said, I mean, when you have the stuff that's working, stick to it. Like Marcus Satterfield, he comes up with some very good creative play calls. Oftentimes they go for touchdowns. They're that good. But it's just like the consistent, 5, 6, 7 yards, put those drives together. it's both players and personnel, as we've heard from head coach Matt Rhule this week. But still, there's a lot to be said about, hey, Nebraska could do a better job in getting that offense in positions to succeed.
But yeah, I mean, you've seen flashes of what they can do, and then that's what makes it all the more frustrating for Nebraska fans is that you go back and you watch the UCLA tape, you're like, this is boring as hell. Like, where did the fun stuff go? It worked, right? And so, yeah, I would be, if I was a Nebraska fan, I'd be pretty frustrated with all of the things right now.
Mm-hmm. And something that I question too is why can't they get the ball to Jamal Banks and Isaiah Nair? And Nair did have some good catches in this last game, but you look at their stats. I mean, they were 4 or 5 catch guys, for that first few parts of the season, those first few games. I mean, it's been like 1 or 2 catches for a week. They've just been not able to get that ball outside to those guys.
Yeah, and some of it is that scheming it up, and then some of it is, again, you think about the OPI against Ohio State, right? Or the drops that have happened, or maybe he's missing a read. Mean Dylan, of course. But yeah, there's some things that are out of their control, but a lot that is also in their control on that.
Mm-hmm. So as Nebraska evaluates this offense, reacts to this UCLA loss, Matt Rhule, he met with the media there on Monday. Always, a chance to reflect, of course, over the previous week's games, but this time in particular, it was very much soul searching. I liken it to kind of an existential crisis, and like 9 games into the season, obviously they're doing this off the back of the 3-game losing streak. Like, yes, you don't want to keep doing the same things that led you to losing, but like you're 9 games into the year, like why are you questioning whether everything you're doing is working or even the right process at this point?
Yeah, that's, again, it's a valid question. This should have been something that had been a talking point earlier in the season, after the loss to Illinois, maybe, right? But surely not now. There's 3 games left. Like, yes, you need one more win to make a bowl game, but why are you overhauling the process now? If you believed in the process so wholeheartedly for the last 1.75 seasons. It's very interesting.
Yeah, like tweaking is one thing, like changing things, wholesale changes is another. And it's very notable. Matt Rhule said he is going to bring in some external eyes this week. Dana Holgorsen, very respected offensive mind there, had some very good years as a head coach there in college football, coordinated also some very high-powered offenses. And then Phil Snow on the defensive side of the ball, longtime Rhule associate, coordinated some of those college defenses, followed him to Carolina as well. Like, these are respected guys, but again, coming in over bye week, 3 games left to play, like that feels like an off-season move, not like in season in the midst of a crisis.
Yeah, so Phil Snow has done some advance work for them all season, so that's not necessarily new. Bringing him in person is the new wrinkle there for Phil specifically. As far as Dana goes, yeah, so we got to rewind a little bit to January, right? When they were trying to figure out who the QB's coach was going to be. They looked at Holgorsen. I saw him at a wrestling meet. Like, he wasn't town. Obviously ended up going with GT on that. But, Dana and Rhule are still, really good friends. They keep in touch on stuff. So Nebraska hiring Dana specifically to be that like offensive consultant was not a surprise to me, just knowing that he'd been kind of linked to the program before. But I mean, Matt Rhule did say he was going to bring in some outside eyes, and he did not lie.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're going to hope that brings some answers, at least brings some, clarity that those guys can help them with. But, as I said, I mean, part of it is maybe schematic, the preparation, the way that they prepare for things. But part of Matt Rhule's message, and this is telling too, it's up to the players. He said the players just have to play. Can't be afraid of making mistakes. And he in particular said Ja'Cory Barney, Vincent Shavers, these 2 freshmen, those are guys that he said they go out there. It doesn't matter if they're perfect. They just play. And it's like when you're saying there are 2 freshmen doing that, like, that's pretty poignant that there's some veterans that are scared of making mistakes out there. Like that's the subtext, I think, to those comments there.
Yeah, I think that too. And, that's the first time that he's, kind of not thrown under the bus, but like publicly said that the players need to execute. That's not something that had been in his vocabulary. He had really taken a lot of the blame for a lot of stuff. Even, some of Marcus's play calling, right? Like it had all kind of fallen at Matt's feet. Now the tone is kind of shifting a little bit. Not a lot. Like Matt's still taking the blame for all of it, but he's also kind of changing the tone just a little bit, which is interesting.
Yeah, I think his point is kind of about like shared accountability, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, the coaches have their own like standards and different things that they have to do, but like the players have to be accountable for executing the plays, doing things right. So, I mean, that is definitely a call to the guys, to certainly change the way that maybe they've been approaching things. And Matt Rhule's message overall was kind of about like, hey, it's a consistency issue, maybe not like a talent, or an issue of that nature, but like he's like, yeah, they've got flashes. That's the infuriating thing to him, that they've not able to be consistent enough. And so I guess the schedule this week, they're practicing Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. They will be back to practice on Sunday, but Rhule and the coaches, they're out recruiting. This is planned several weeks ahead of time. This is a big recruiting weekend. They're going to be checking in on some high school prospects, high school games, being able to get into some of those schools and see those guys. And it's like, that's tough time. And there's a lot to get done in a short amount of time. And they need to accomplish a lot over this bye week.
That they do, but, this is the situation that they made for themselves.
Yeah. So, and also team coming up out of that bye week, USC suffered a real tough loss. They're 4-5 right now. Like that is a crucial game for USC as well.
Yeah. If you think things are bad in Nebraska, you can just go take a look at the coverage of, from the LA Times right now or the other media groups down there. Things are not great there either.
The noise level is about 100 around that USC program right now. So big stakes to that game. And again, a lot happening around this Nebraska football program this week as they try to bounce back from that UCLA loss. So that is what's going on with Nebraska football right now. But now is our opportunity to talk a little Husker hoops. We'll have plenty to talk about this season. We always enjoy catching up with those men's and women's teams and two very exciting squads this year. Both kicked off their season, or tipped off, sorry, I should say. Stuck in football mode.
Come on,
what do you think a basketball kickoff would look like? Bad. Shoes are flying out there on the court.
I'm not even going to acknowledge that with a response.
But Monday, hoops doubleheader. You were checking it out. You were seeing how those teams looked. And let's start on the women's basketball side because they played first on Monday pretty early. Testing out. People can take some time off work to go support them. But man, they came out hot. 18-2 lead against Omaha, ended up winning by 40 points, 88-48. Starting five in this one, Alexis Markowski, Natalie Potts, Allison Widener, Kellen Hake, and Britt Prince. You like that starting five? Pretty good. Good balance to it.
I do. You wonder, maybe things will shift a little bit depending on the matchup. Maybe throw Logan Nisley in there or Petra Bojan, both of whom played great off the bench yesterday. So, but no, I like that starting lineup a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good experience of the veterans, in their good guard forward balance. And first game in the Nebraska uniform for freshman guard Britt Prince. Very exciting. Eagerly anticipated debut, 10 points, 5 assists, 2 steals, already has kind of all those makings of that all-around guard. She's fun to watch.
Yeah, she only had one turnover and it was a bad one, but get it out of the way now, right? But yeah, I love watching her play. She was so much fun to watch in high school and I'm really excited to see what she can do in the 1 year that she gets with Alexis Markowski. Two kind of very similar, storylines and that just dominant, girls from the state with a lot of spotlight on them, right? Nationally, locally. And I'm just excited for the 1 year that we get for that.
And if you're thinking about a guard who can feed the post, get some pretty good passes in there. Yeah, Bray Prince, she can do that.
Yeah, she can also create her own opportunities. I was a little curious to see if she would drive to the paint as much as she did in high school. She did do that several times, um, which I like. She's not afraid of physicality. Now, they were playing Omaha. They're not going up against USC quite yet. So I'll be interested to see what her game looks like as the season continues.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Alexis Markowski, another double-double. She has a lot of them. She's up there in the record books.
She is now number one.
Yep.
After that. I texted a little bit with Jordan Hooper yesterday, and Jordan is just super excited
Very
for
cool.
her.
Yeah,
super excited for her. So Jordan found out she was just washing windows up at home and was listening to the radio call when it happened. So
that's cool.
She's super excited for her.
Another program legend.
Oh, of course.
Absolutely. Yeah, and also, I mean, that double-double, that was just over half the game she played. I mean, that's super impressive, very efficient. And Nebraska, I mean, with that dominance, they were able to empty the bench, get a look at the depth on this year's squad. I mean, seems like a lot of those players, and still it's early in the year to sort out that rotation, but it seems like, you talk about 7, 8, like, it seems like that bench is pretty deep.
Yeah, they have a lot of, really talented guards, which I am very curious to see how that rotation is going to go, right? Because, you don't forget about Allison Widener, but she hadn't played in 22 months. And so my column was mainly about her yesterday, and, because she scored in double figures too, and she kind of looked like her old self, which was really satisfying to see. But no, when you get her back, that just adds another level to this team, right? Because they were without her for what felt like forever. December 2022.
Yeah. Missed that spark on offense.
Oh, absolutely. And, she didn't shy away from any physicality, which, she's never going to do that.
That's a hallmark of her game right there.
Yeah, she's never, going to back away from that. And so super fun to see her back. But yeah, getting her back, that just adds another level to the depth for the guards.
Mm-hmm. And so next up for Nebraska, they host Southeastern Louisiana on Saturday and Southern next Tuesday. 1-0 already, and the expectations for this year's squad, they're ranked inside the top 25. Like, they expect to be pretty good.
Yes, they do. They are not satisfied with just making the NCAA tournament. They want to advance. They want to get to the Sweet 16 again. It's been a while since they've done that. But they believe this team is capable of pretty special things, that included.
Yeah, and it's a pretty good year for the Big Ten. Pretty good women's basketball conference right now. So they will be tested, of course, when that comes to play. And the men's basketball team, let's move on to them. Also opening their season here, 87-67 win over Texas Rio Grande Valley. A bit closer than most people would have expected.
Yeah, if you look at the final score, it's like, okay, sure.
Yeah, 20-point win. Yeah, that was easy, right?
Well, it was a 4-point game very late in that one before Connor Esigian went on a 7-point run by himself over like a 42-ish second span. So good for Connor Esigian for making that less scary than it needed to be. But yeah, the starting five there, Bryce Williams, Rhule Wooster, Juwan Gary, Burke Buchtengel, and Braxton Mia. I think they're still kind of figuring out what they want to do there. I like the big lineup. It didn't necessarily work super great in this specific matchup. So I don't know who you would sub out there, but I really think that you need another guard in there, like Esigian or Gavin Griffiths, perhaps.
Yeah. I mean, Bryce Williams, he was probably the standout performer on offense. Rhule Wooster, again, he also had a good day scoring, but pretty slow from that Nebraska offense. Not quite that rhythm to their play yet.
Yeah, they look a little disjointed. And it's early, right? And you got to think about it. This team has 9 new people.
Very new team.
And so, I mean, just with that starting lineup, Raleigh is new. And he is your point guard, like a real point guard, something Nebraska hasn't had in years. Burke, again, a transfer, or him coming in, Braxton, a transfer. And then you look at some of like the role players who also stood out, like Andrew Morgan, Asijan, Griffiths. They're all new. And then, there's the freshmen too who didn't play, or the local technically a transfer from Southeast Community College, Justin Bullis. Like, there's just a lot of new people, and I think they're just still kind of figuring that out.
Yeah, one of those things that may take some time to sort out. But how about the expectations for this year's team? Because certainly, last year, that veteran heavy group, there were big expectations for them. I mean, a little bit maybe more uncertainty, but there's also that potential there. What do you expect out of this Husker men's team?
They want to get back to the NCAA tournament, and they want to win. No Nebraska men's team has ever won an NCAA tournament game ever in the history of the program. They're the only, power conference school to not have achieved that feat. And they want to be the group to do it. They've got a lot to figure out before we get to that, though. I think they will figure what they want out. Somebody's going to be left out of the rotation, though.
Yeah. I
don't know who that will be, but it'll be somebody. Last year, that was Boogie Coleman, who was the man on the wrong side of that. As it stands right now, without putting a win total on it, they should be more physical and they should be more balanced. What does that translate to? I'm not sure, but that's what they want to be. They want to be more physical because they got beat up against Texas A&M in the NCAA tournament last year. And they went out, they got more physical. But what will that turn into? I'm not sure.
Yeah. And what will the shooting look like?
Yeah, it was
Also a big
really
question.
weird to not see a ton of attempted threes last night. That's going to take some time to get used to, especially since Rio Grande Valley put up like a bajillion of them, and a lot of them went in, which is why the game ended up being as close as it was there late.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, you have those veterans, Bryce Williams, Juwan Gary, and some of those transfers that they brought into. I mean, there's going to be a sense of urgency about this team. So I think you can't expect some of those, early season bumps to get smoothed out over the course of the season. And next up for Nebraska, Bethune-Cookman on Saturday and Farley Dickinson on Wednesday. Those are the next two games, also at home before they can hit the road. But 1-0 starts for both Husker Hoops teams. And again, they are back in action here this weekend. And bye week, that's always a good news for us riders. we appreciate the bye weeks.
Yeah.
Double bye week this year.
Yeah. Well, for football, but there's no rest for
Always
volleyball.
Stuff going on.
There's no rest for volleyball.
Yeah.
They have a big week this weekend, or week-ish. They play Oregon on Thursday, which is a top 15 match at like 9 p.m. Central Time. So
stay up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that one could go quite a few sets as well. So.
It could, but then you never know, right? Nebraska handled Wisconsin pretty easily in air quotes.
For a top 10 team, definitely. So still plenty going on in Husker athletics with the football team on bye this week, but that will do it for this week's episode of the Life in the Red podcast. Appreciate all of you listeners and viewers sticking with us, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to this week's Life in the Red podcast. Our theme music is composed by Sasha Indy. The stories continue on journalstar.com.